All right. Hi, everyone. It seems that we are live now and, getting ready to talk about opportunities in this post-COVID world. So welcome. We'll just give some participants a time to join us. We will start shortly after 12. These kinds of things always take time to get adjusted and logged in. So we'll give folks the chance.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Great.
I see we have a few participants online and some others are joining. You can see the number increase, which is exciting.
Great. Some nice familiar faces. I guess not faces, but names that we can see. It's good to see some new folks as well joining us. Thanks so much. It's always funny to do these sort of waiting for everyone to join moments.
Should have some background music next time.
Yeah, that would actually be a good idea. We'll think about that. We'll make a note for the next webinar. But we're starting to see some more folks logging in. It's great. Welcome if you just came in. We're just giving folks a few minutes to jump on. We want to make sure that that everybody gets to hear as much of the presentation as they can. Hope you guys are enjoying. If you're in Toronto, we've got a little break in the heat. We went from immediately summer to winter to summer, and now we've got a little bit of a break, so we don't have glaring sun, which is always better for a webinar too.
Back to spring.
Yeah, back to spring. Great. There we go. Some more folks are joining. We'll just give everyone another minute before we dive in. Maybe there is a chat function. We are, curious to hear where everyone is coming from and calling in from. So if you want to give a chat to, to everyone, the panelists and attendees, let us know where you guys are dialing in from. Great, we've got neighbors in Ottawa, in Toronto. Great. West Coast representing. Great to see you, Adrian. Hi to you as well.
And I want to also say thank you for those who sent us some questions. Hopefully we'll answer most of them today.
Great. Well, keep letting us know where you guys are from. And as we're, a couple minutes after 12, maybe we get started and folks will pick up from the recording anything they might have missed.
Yeah, and I think we may want to just apologize ahead if we're all working from home, so if things happen, like you hear a doorbell or a dog bark at some point, so apologies for these things ahead. We try to control our environment as much as we can, but talking about the new normal, it seems this is part of the new normal. Okay, so Heather, are you ready to get started? Okay, so we want to use most of the time we have, so we're going to try also to leave some time at the end for questions. So yes, thanks for joining us. We prepared this webinar. We know that there are a lot of conversations around, post-pandemic and what people are expecting after the crisis kind of unfolds. Our focus today is really about finding opportunity in post-COVID times, and we're going to talk about the new normal and what approaches you could use to really prepare yourself and prepare your organization for what to come. For those who don't know us, I'm Simon Mhanna. I'm an innovation designer at the moment, and I'm today with my colleague Heather Daam-Rossi. Hi, Heather.
Hi, guys. I'm also an innovation designer at the moment.
And I want to also give a shout out to Tiffany Elliott, who's also joining us behind the scenes, moderating today for us. So hi, Tiffany.
Yes.
Hi, Tiffany. Okay,
Great.
let's get started.
Yeah, so we're kind of talking about this as hello, #new normal. Today, we're going to go through some introductions and we'll set the stage. And then we're going to dive into focusing on the customer and engaging your employees, all leading up to talking about pivot and how, organizations can pivot. We're, throughout we'll talk about some sort of stories and examples. We've got a few specific project stories to share and, to talk about how this is the time for courage. And as Simon said, we are going to, have time for questions. We will record this and share the deck as a follow-up. And so you can follow along as we go today, and you'll always have that resource.
Just quickly introducing the moment for those who don't know our team. We are a group of experienced innovation consultants. We focus mostly on working with organizations facing complex challenges, helping them really innovate while also solving for today's problems. We do that while also keeping an eye on the future. Just a quick representation of what that looks like. We believe that actions speak louder than words. So we believe in building future-ready products and services that activate your organization. And by activating your organization and working with your teams, we know that we can build better products and services. We call this future ready now.
Before we say hello to this new normal, or I guess we've already have, Tiffany's going to pop up a question, or no, it's not going to pop up a question, but I guess we have a question for the chat. If you guys want to talk about what are you hoping to learn today, it helps us make sure we're focusing on the right things and, giving the right emphasis, although we are prepared. We can also think on our feet. So we'd love to hear in the chat, why is it you've come here and what is it that you hope to learn? So I'll continue while you guys can share that. Jack Welch famously said, change before you have to, which is great. But here we are, and now we have to. So, how do you change when things have gotten to this point? You've got to be sure that you're changing the right things, and while still setting yourself up for success in the future. And that future is still coming in full force, as we know. And that's really what we're going to be talking about today.
So it's definitely not a surprise for everyone that we are in the midst of a global recession. And we know the longer we stay in lockdown and the longer we take to really figure out how we are reopening the economy, the longer it will be for us to find ways to recover. So, and we know there are a lot of predictions for what the new normal is, and analysts and futurists are working on daily basis to figure out that uncertainty and provide recommendations, but we know that this is kind of changing and will continue to change as things will unfold. We talk about the new normal. It's important to stay focused on keeping us safe and keeping our communities strong. But one thing that we want to also talk about is after this crisis ends, and it will end, there will be a new state, and we need to be ready for that. So we need to work with organizations to really establish some practices that will set them up to find those opportunities to survive today, but also prepare for what's going to come next.
And disruption is not a one-time occurrence. So as the market continues to shift, organizations, need to continue to adapt. So getting out of that survive mode. Now, when we talk about how organizations experience disruption, we kind of see three modes. It's almost like three separate phases. We call survive, strive, and thrive. Survive is really where you're barely getting by. All energy of the organization is focused on hitting those break-even financial performance, keeping the team focused on extremely short-term goals. Strive is, when you start to notice the financial performance is recovering, the team has space and energy to start thinking about medium-term goals, and then ultimately leading your team to thrive which is where you've really hit your stride. So financial performance is getting healthier or is healthy. Teams are clear on their mission, and you're all working towards that ambitious long-term goals. Tiffany's going to launch a quick poll here. We want to get a sense of, which mode are you currently in? Survive, strive, or thrive? In terms of your organization. I know we might all feel differently from an organization, but where's your organization sitting in terms of this mode? I love that we can see the live results. So we start to see some people are starting to shift from survive to strive, which is good. We've been at this for a few months, and some the new normal is getting to become just that. It's becoming a bit more normal. We'll just let those keep going, and as I continue, what's going on out there. We're not here to talk necessarily about there's a poll that's coming too quickly. Okay, we're sharing the poll results. So we're at 62% strive, and then 30% are still in survive, and some folks has even shifted into the thrive mode, which is great. When we get into we wanted to start with a quick scan here. So some of the high level trends that we've been noticing, not by any means like a full synthesis or report of what's happening, because we aren't really, that's not what we're here to talk about. We're kind of here to talk about, what to do with all of this. But, we wanted to set the stage with a few points to get us all, warmed up to the topic, and starting with some things we're noticing in terms of the organizations. They're overwhelmed and flaws are being exposed. We're seeing a wave of businesses that shouldn't have been affected by the slowdown, and a lot of people being laid off really quickly without notice. Businesses are planning for uncertainties. Things are changing daily. The global behavior is unlike anything we've ever seen. So, people are initially we're like, yeah, we're buying everything online. And now that we've sort of been in this for a lot longer, people are starting to think about, how am I cutting back? How am I being more responsible? So this creates a lot of uncertainties for businesses. Organizations are taking the opportunity to reset and pivot, towards their version of an ideal future. We're not going back to a new normal, and it's a long road ahead. This is the message coming from, CEOs at banks like Scotiabank and RBC. So this is really the message that we're hearing. And we're even seeing the rise of coalitions and partnerships, not only across governments, but also professional organizations, startups banding together, even competitors becoming partners to share things like distribution channels. And bringing a little bit more focus into the employee experience, some of the things that we're seeing is accelerated speed of change, particularly around the future of work, restructuring workplaces, redefining roles, rapid learning. Some organizations are even sharing that they're not going back to the office and they're working from home, more permanently. So Google is, talking about at least till the end of 2020. Twitter is saying that, maybe people can work from home forever. And if they do go back, it's going to feel really different. Expectations on employers, increase flexibility and whatnot, so that people don't have to always work that traditional 9-to-5 window. And lastly, video chats and online conference apps like we're on right now, as we all know, have experienced this explosive growth. And I guess the last small silver lining in this, and to end a bit on a lighter note, is, there's an anticipated retiring of business attire. The trend toward casual attire is going to accelerate quickly, and as people are getting used to, wearing their comfy clothes and being comfortable all day. So those are the types of things that we're seeing that are happening in terms of this COVID area.
So a lot of obviously signals and a lot of predictions, and some of them are exciting, some of them are less exciting, maybe a bit more worrying even, but this is definitely showing us that things are shifting and shifting drastically, and we see this as impacting customer behavior and also employee experience. So first, we're going to spend some time talking about customers and what does it really mean, and how are organizations going to respond to that change. Our practice is rooted in human-centered design, and we believe that organizations who take human centricity not just as a mere capability, but really as a strategy to really tap into customer experience and customer knowledge, and use that to create more relevant products and services will give them a competitive edge and will really put them in a stronger position in the market. So we're going to first talk about a few things that you want to keep in mind and then move into some practical tips that you can apply.
The first thing to keep in mind is not to assume. So your assumptions may actually be your downfall. We're saying don't rely on what you've once learned about your customers. You're going to need to listen more closely and reestablish an understanding about what they feel, what they do, and most importantly, why they're doing those things, especially in this new context, right? A lot has changed and it's changing really quickly. And so the next thing is really about, sensing and responding. So are you set up to listen to those changes? And then do you have the processes in place to respond quickly? It's about being more agile and quick in learning, but also acting on it. It's important to keep your finger on the pulse of what's happening in your customer experience so that you can respond in the relevant way that really meets their needs.
Yeah, and taking action quickly demonstrates that you care. Nothing is worse than trying to push some products that are not relevant anymore. And we know that the market changed really quickly in the last 2 months, but we just look at maybe some advertisements and some of the campaigns and we say like, hey, this doesn't represent anymore what I'm experiencing today. So we really want to help establish practices that enable you to change what you do in tune with what customers are expecting and needing today, so that you can really show them that you care and that you are human-centered. So practical tips.
Yeah, before we dive into some practical tips, I guess we wanted to get a sense if people are actually currently talking to their customers in order to inform, immediate actions and things that they're doing. So no judgment. We just want to know if people are still able to keep up that practice and talking to, as it says, customers or patients, citizens, employees, whatever it might be, just to get a sense of that. It looks like some people have managed to continue and some people, are diving in a little bit, which is great to see. Now, a couple of the practical tips. All right, so about half the people, have managed to keep up that regular practice, and then some people have managed to go into, continue to speak to a few people, and some people haven't managed to get there yet. So there are kind of 3 practical tips that, what we're looking at is, the first one is observing. So even some light online and social media scans can go a long way to find out what your customers are interested in, what they're reading, what they're posting online. Although the pandemic sort of measures put limitations on where we can be and how we can engage with our customers, research is really multifaceted, and the toolkit is really abundant that we can draw from in order to hear from our customers. So there's lots of different ways that we can do this. When we talk about foreseeing, we're collecting and curating sources and signals of change and these trends, which is a really good way to understand the changing of the nature of people's behaviors and the larger market trends and the larger context and what's happening. And then lastly, engaging. So I know that nothing replaces that firsthand learning and talking to your customers directly, but there are ways that you can check in on them to see how they're doing and what they might need. In the past, organizations that might have had really strong human-centered design or research, customer research, would have spent more time to get to know their customers and longer processes. But these days we don't really have that time. So we need to make sure that things are being gathered quickly. There's quicker ways that this can be done. And
so we're going to jumping in. So we're going to show you some really practical ways of doing that, things that we are doing internally, but also doing with our clients. To Heather's point, because there are a lot of things that are happening online today. Social media is quite active, and a lot of the data that we can get from online behaviors and are really important to collect. But also a lot of studies and articles are being published, some of them based on case studies, some of them based on some speculations on some signals. It's important to gather that and leverage that information. It's probably like an easy and cheap way to do research today and keep your finger on the pulse. A practical way to do it, is to create kind of a centralized knowledge center. And we gather on daily basis things that we find online, on social media and articles. And we've created a channel for us, like in Slack, to share these with the team, but also create one place where we can extract that information and log it into this very simple spreadsheet that we can go to extract insights or keep track of how things are evolving. This is a practical way to do it. And we're helping also our clients establish these practices and put systems in place to help them gather specific information relevant to their industry and to their customers. Heather also mentioned that usually, human-centered design research and co-creation sessions would have been very different. And pre-COVID time, we have limitations as to what we can do today and how we can engage with customers and shareholders and stakeholders in those contexts. So one thing we did is created a structure that enabled us to kind of pre-qualify customers and create this panel of customers that we can tap into on regular basis. So you can imagine this as being like quick rounds of research, sometimes interviews, sometimes like getting some testing done on some prototypes that really minimizes the effort that goes into the logistics, but also keeps that cadence going and keep us really close to the customers over weeks as things are changing and as organizations are coming up with ideas and looking to get reactions from their customers. So these are really practical ways that we've established that we also, if you have more questions on that, we can speak to in more details. So we talked about the customers for a little bit. We want to talk about the employees. Also, we know that our employee experience have changed. We are now working from home. In most cases, some people are working more hours, some people are working less hours. Like there are, again, a lot of changes that we probably have not predicted and designed for. So also applying that human-centered design lens on really engaging your employees and your colleagues in understanding how they are positioned to really support the organization to move out of the crisis is really a critical thing to do. We know employees are the ambassadors of your organization, but also they're talking about the knowledge center. They have also a lot of insights and information that we can use to make their experience better, but also to make our customers' experience better. So a few things also to keep in mind. One, don't take them for granted. In times of crisis, we focus on the business, we focus on what we're doing for our customers, and sometimes the internal stuff take a back seat. This is a mistake that we should not fall for. Again, your employees and your teams are a key asset that will help you get out of the crisis and will set up your organization to continue to deliver good work and good products and services to your customers. Another thing is to really tap into what those employees know and are experiencing. We know that frontline teams are on contact with customers on daily basis, and they know what is changing in the market and how customers are engaging with your brand or engaging with your products and services. So it's really important to include them in the conversation and really learn from them firsthand what we could do better or what we could do different. And that requires creating a safe space for people to really engage and share their thoughts and share their experiencing and share their ideas. Trust is a critical thing. Like we say, we move at the speed of trust, and it's true. If our systems are supporting us to, unleash our creativity, do the right work, then we can continue to support the organization. If the systems are holding us back, then we are not really putting all our potential to the service of the organization. And we know that this is hard, especially because now we may lack visibility. We may feeling some disconnect because we're working remotely, we're working at different maybe time shifts. So it is something to also keep an eye on and not take lightly. Moving also into some practical tips that you could use and leverage to continue to measure your employee experience and tap into your employees' insights and knowledge. We know pulse checks are quite regular. A lot of organizations do these on a regular basis. I think it's important at this time to revisit those questions. People are working from home, their conditions are different, so you might need a different set of questions, or you might want to expand on them. We know that emotional bandwidth is something that is okay to talk about today, and we want to enable people to speak to it. So to Heather's point, professionalism is being redefined. So we need to also redefine what we are measuring and what really employees need to do their best work. And by that, we might need to really revisit our culture. The things that we said we stand for in a couple of months back may not be true anymore. So we want to continue to set up our culture to enable our people to do the right work and to do their best work. And collaboration may be also one of the aspects that you want to attend to. Technology is really important, but it's not about just that. You need to have the processes in place and the practices and rituals in place to enable people to work well together, especially that now they have more pressure to make quicker decisions and make the right decisions.
And diving into, an example of that, and also giving Simon a break to take a deep breath. One example of that idea of the collaborative practice, we leverage those technologies and they're in place, but when one of our clients, as many as most people, moved to working remotely, they didn't necessarily have those processes or norms in place to really work efficiently and keep up the momentum of the work that they were doing. Let alone being able to pivot and shift to kind of new ideas and new things that they had to focus on with the changing markets. So what we did is actually we designed a 2-day experience that had a clear process. We use technology like Zoom and specifically the breakout rooms, and in order to allow people to have dialogue, to have the conversations that need to be had, come back, bring those ideas back together. And we leverage things like Mural, and Mural is an online whiteboard, if anybody doesn't know what it is, which allowed everybody to contribute and to have sort of that common, place where the conversation could be held. And eventually, we got them to go from ideation to decisions within a short period of time and be aligned and be able to move forward quickly. Another example that we wanted to bring up is around decision-making processes. So we know that companies have a hard time on a normal day to figure out their decision-making processes. And, in times of crisis or, when you're in survive mode, it can make it even more challenging. So, you're not in the same room, you don't have that body language, and you probably don't have full visibility like you normally would. There's no one walking by your desk and having conversations and picking up those signals so that you really have that visibility you need in order to make decisions. So one way that we recommend and that we use with our clients is integrated decision making. It's inspired by our holacracy practice. And within this framework, it's really clear who's accountable to which decisions before the decisions need to be made. And, there's a mapped process that ensures they're being made at the end of every meeting. So that makes things more efficient, more productive, and sort of keeps, things moving forward. We'll actually be sure to send out more information about many of these practical tips after the webinar so that, you don't have to be frantically looking up integrated decision making in this moment, but we will send that out.
So we talked about the focus on the customers and what you could potentially learn from the customers, and also how you can engage your employees in collecting insights and knowledge, and all of that to serve the pivot. So we know that moments of disruptions dictate certain pivots. And in general, like when we talk about pivots, we know that some pivots are things that we initiate. These are changes that we see that are needed in our organizations, and that's usually a positive thing, something that you can control. But in circumstances like this, pivots are kind of imposed on us. The circumstances are so that we can't continue to be to work the same or be who we are. So we need to find ways that could reduce that pain. Even like when it's imposed on us, it doesn't mean that we can't really take the rein and flip things around and be in control, because there are a lot of, again, ways and tools that would set you up to do this really well. So now that we talked about how you can gather information, we can talk about how you can move forward.
Yeah, and in this presentation, sort of, we talked about different ways that you can engage your customer and employees to learn about what's happening and gather insights. And, we're really interested in how you can actually, action those things. That's usually what we try to do at the moment, is we're really trying to be actionable about the work that we do. And, we think it's really important to structure a conversation around these topics. So we're, of course, partial to our own disruption canvas, because it brings you through to think about all those levels we've just touched on, your organization, your customers, your team, and all those external signals, and actually enable you to identify what those changes mean, and ultimately what actions you can take now in the short term and also in the future. So no one is immune to disruption. It happens all the time. And so, of course, now we're, COVID this and COVID that, but organizations that sense into opportunities, that can respond and adapt to disruption, whatever it is, are the ones that will continue to succeed. So resilience is really the key to responding to disruption, no matter what the context. It happens all the time. There's always disruptions in the marketplace, in our customers' lives, and within our own organization. So whether you use the disruption canvas or another framework, we really recommend finding a systemic approach to get you and your team thinking about those tangible actions you can take now in order to shift your team from that mode of surviving into striving, or from striving into thriving in the future. And now we want to dive into 3 things to keep in mind while you're pivoting. The first one is to find your opportunities. Identify changes and impacts from the disruption and turn those into opportunities. So what is it that we can actually leverage based on what we have to offer, based on our skills and capabilities that are relevant in today's context, and meeting our customers in new ways where they're at. This is where we think about things like shifting manufacturing equipment, or adjusting different channels that we might meet our customers. So this is going to support the development of an action plan that enables your team and organization to overcome the disruption now. So, when we're in a time where everything feels uncertain, it's really critical to leverage the change and create more value and find opportunities that let you meet the needs of your customers and be able to drive the change. I guess the next thing is, it's not weird to pivot. And it might feel weird. It might say our customers know us for this, or our customers might know us for that, but it's happening everywhere, right? I talked about the distilleries making hand sanitizers, or, auto manufacturers making ventilators, right? Even knowledge-based companies are using their skills and capacities in new ways, right? Pivoting teams of scientists and wellness experts from vitamin companies to actually focus on, COVID-19 research and bring concise data to communities, and, speeding up launch of new programs in order to, find new ways to bring people income. One of my favorite is like coffee roasters, finding new channels, like launching subscription services, when they're forced to shut down their bricks and mortar locations. We're all grateful that our favorite coffee roasters are finding other channels to meet our customers where they're at. And even though, I like to go there and pick up my coffee and have an interaction, I still need it. And so they're meeting me where I'm at. And, these examples of pivots are win-win. It's not weird. Customers are getting more what they need, and companies are staying relevant and profitable.
Yeah, and as you are talking to your customers and talking to your employees, you're really trying right now to focus on closing the gap and helping your business survive. But that doesn't mean you have to constrain yourself of thinking about the future and establishing also the base for what the future looks like. This is where opportunity maps are really important to highlight what venues you can pursue in the future. And as we said before, the crisis will end and the new normal will unfold, and we need to be ready to really pick up wherever we are and run with things. And you will only be able to do that if you're prepared and you have what you need, but you have also the clarity of what opportunities you can really pursue. So also jumping right into some practical tips on how you could do that. One, we want to talk about the importance of testing. In the past, you may have had longer cycles to prepare and optimize and create perfect systems and ideas before bringing them to the customer. Today, you really need to do this at a much faster cadence because the customers' needs are changing and their point of views are also changing and things are unfolding. So there's no point of losing your time and losing your energy in the wrong investments. It is testing early and testing often is something consistent with human-centered design, but I think it's even more relevant in days like this. Thinking about iterations on being married to who you are today or what you're thinking you could be, but really being open to what comes up from your research, from what customers are saying, from what opportunities are emerging, and what employees are capable of and able to do for you are really important things to set up that mindset, that iterative mindset that will move you closer to finding the right opportunities. And you might want to reconsider how you measure success. You might want to reconsider your metrics and how you are assessing if you're doing well or you're not doing well. And this is where you look into those, again, the different stages, survive, strive, and thrive, to really make sure you understand what you're hoping to achieve at each stage, and where you are now and what you need to deliver on is may be different from what you could expect in the future. We know also roadmaps and blueprints are really important components in how organizations manage long-term goals and long-term plans. Roadmaps may be a bit challenging because of the cadence of the change today. So you might not want to spend time on building long roadmaps, but blueprints are important because it helps you visualize the system in a way that connects all the pieces together so that you understand when you're making a change or making a decision at one point, how it's impacting the system in other places. And this is where also, for those who are familiar maybe with the 3 horizons, it's every business needs to operate with this way, thinking about how can I make what I'm doing today better? How can I optimize? But also keeping an eye on what things I need to change as things are also changing in the environment, in the landscape, and also starting to build towards that future. The horizons may have also shrunk in time. So I think organizations use different time frames, but now we know that those cycles are much shorter. And as you are getting out of survive and really doing what you need to continue to operate today, you really need to keep an eye on what's coming up and what opportunities are going to be your leverage to get from horizon 1 into 2 into 3. So this is where also we want to ask a question to everyone. If are you thinking ahead? Do you feel like your organization is spending time to think beyond just the immediate horizon? So you have the 3 options in front of you on the screen. Will help you also kind of give us some insight as to how you're spending your energy and time.
Oh, it looks like a pretty, relatively even balance. People are still able to, to be looking at alternative business models. Maybe they're forced to, given the context. Like Simon said, those horizons have certainly gotten shorter.
So I think Horizon 2 aligns a little bit with the Strive, I think, results we got earlier. So to just conclude this section, I would say we know today we're really focused on finding opportunities that we can act on fast, leveraging data and feedback to really make informed decisions and taking actionable insights into decisions. Also really thinking about diversifying maybe your revenue stream and adapting your goals and metrics to what will help you survive and set you up to think about the future and think about tomorrow by starting to kind of think about how you would invest and fund your future experiments, starting to really get some early insights and early learnings as to what you need in terms of capabilities and infrastructure to deliver on that in the future. And so eventually what you want to do is create more resilience within your organization.
Yeah, we had a couple, we've shared some examples of types of things we've done with clients. We had a couple, I guess, more robust project stories we wanted to share. And we're sort of moving into the end of the presentation. So I also wanted to say, if questions are starting to emerge, feel free to put them into the chat already. And we'll have a get-go when we get to some of the questions that we have. Now, the first project story was really about accelerating a strategic plan. So here, the work that typically takes, months of work, we really accelerated the process and managed to deliver it in a few weeks. So leading up to the COVID-19 disruption, this organization knew already that they had to be prepared to pivot as their market was sort of in flux. And so we did a lot of deep customer research and foresight work, and that uncovered new offers that would make an impact on their business model. And it really became imperative right at the moment that it sort of crystallized what it was we needed to do. COVID hits. We really wanted to accelerate the strategic plan in order to activate these new ways of working, given the context that we're finding ourselves in. And some of the key outcomes were, by creating an opportunity map, and it was really driven by those customer insights and foresight-driven future scenarios. The organization was really set to quickly triage critical projects and deliver business results as the opportunities arise. So, we didn't do a map over time, but we did it over, technology and what things were happening in the marketplace and the skills of the organization. So they're able to sort of pick it off and action it really quickly. And in order to do that, actually, naming the mindsets the organization needed in order to achieve this pivot was really critical. So all the way down to the detail of, what skills, what roles, and what are the accountabilities of the roles and domains that were needed in order to work in this new way. So it created alignment across the organization, reduced churn, and was able to action those things right away. So those types of structures set the organization up really quickly in order to pivot into this new normal.
Another example that is more specific to maybe like the retail space that maybe a lot of you would resonate with, knowing that we talked about that shift into like online. This organization was not fully set up to like really deliver on that volume of online demand, and that obviously created a lot of pressure on their customer service. And they knew that before coming into this that they're not fully set up for this, but they were struggling on how they could achieve new ways to do that. And as we mentioned before, the mindset sometimes is that working with customers and working with employees could take a lot of time. So the challenge in this project was to like really engage customers, get their firsthand reactions on what could be done, and getting those assumptions and ideas that the business was kind of struggling with and wrestling with to be validated really quick, so they could move into action and informed decisions. Very similar to what we had described in the presentation, we created a panel that we were able to go to for over a couple of weeks to bring, first do some initial research and then bring some ideas to test with them. And then we had a 2-day workshop with the internal team that helped us like really take all of these ideas that were generated through the virtual co-creation session and research sessions with customers into actionable solutions that they could implement right away. And obviously having processes in place and systems in place to guide that thinking and enable that stakeholder collaboration meant that they were able to make decisions and really drive results much faster than they would in other circumstances. I hope these stories kind of bring things to life for you. We just want to say at the end that we know it's hard and it might be a bit overwhelming, but this time is a time for courage. It's time to take that leap and seize the opportunities as we see them come in. An interesting maybe quote that would be very relevant in this context is that after the storm, things are never the same. So we need really to embrace this and be open to riding that wave, taking in all the opportunities that are coming in through our, research, our touch points with customers and our employees to really create a data-driven decision making and finding opportunities that would stick, so that your organizations are more relevant to the people, customers, and employees, but also resilient to the next storm, because we know that these storms will keep coming, and our job is to continue to reinvent ourselves and our organizations to stay ahead of the curve. And when we don't get the opportunity to be ahead of the curve, really ride that curve and come on the other end of it stronger and more successful.
So that brings us to our time to answer some questions. And, there's a few that we saw in the chat. If you have more, please populate them. Simon and I will stick around and try to get to as many of them as possible. And they will be recorded. So if you missed the answer to your question, hopefully you can catch it on the recording. I guess it goes without saying, but Simon and I are obviously passionate about this, as many of our colleagues are at the moment. I should say probably all of our colleagues at the moment. So, if you want to reach out and talk more about the content in this webinar, please do. And it probably also goes without saying that if you want to talk about new ways you can engage with your customers in this new context, how to do things a lot, faster and keep up the momentum and agility and stay on the pulse of things, in this new normal, we'd also love to talk about it and find ways to support you. So please do reach out, on the next slide. Yeah, so thank you. And I think we'll get to some questions now, unless Simon has any other things to say. I think.
No, I will stop sharing my screen so I can also look at the questions that are in the chat window.
So I guess I'm trying to make sure we catch the line here. I see Stephanie asked early on, what specific tools and frameworks are you leaning on as you work with your clients on approaching changes? So how do you support clients in moving away from business as usual? Lots to say about that. What about you, Simon?
I'm trying to find the question. I think I'm a bit behind the thread.
Yeah, I went back. Okay, so the specific tools and frameworks that we're leaning on, it's a lot of similar things that we would do on a normal basis, but we're able to do it sometimes with a lighter touch. So when we go with our customers, Simon talked about, some of those things that we were doing, conversations, bringing people in for multiple touch points. Tools we're using, we're big fans of Zoom quite often. However, our clients are on Microsoft Teams. So we're able to leverage a lot of those video platforms and make the most of what we can do. And we love virtual whiteboards like Mural in order to, have a common conversation. And Simon, do you want to take the second part, is how do you support clients in moving away from business as usual?
Yeah, I think also kind of building on what Heather's saying. So the technology is really important, but we know sometimes the pressure of the current situation makes it a bit hard for people to carve out that space to think through things and work in a productive way. The pressure is always high. So we find our role is really in creating a safe space for people to bring their tensions, bring the things that are on their mind, but also design a process that will help them more effectively go through the challenge that they need to go through, think through it, leveraging the technology. So the technology definitely helps. And I think also this ties to some of the questions that are coming also through, like right now, around what has changed. Like a lot of things has changed. So we see that now a lot of our clients who have never worked from home now having to shift their whole operations to work from home. And that creates a lot of challenges in terms of how they manage their processes, how they give people access to tools and things from remote places. And it puts a lot of pressure on what can be done and how fast things can be done. So we see also that these tools and mapping tools, like when we're talking about like blueprints and things, help people identify the priorities and understand what needs to be done and how, and also helping create more clarity around to who's doing what, because that also creates a lot of confusion and we assume a lot of things and becomes hard to really deliver and meet our goals and achieve the results that we want to do. So keeping that tight alignment is really important, and also enabling people to not have to kind of centralize all the decision making is important.
Mm-hmm.
Like an example kind of related to the project that I was speaking to about customer service was also about enabling the frontline teams to make decisions without having to escalate every complaint to their management. So giving them clear accountabilities and giving them clear margins that they can play within and make the customer experience better without having to create this backlog of complaints was a way that helped really reduce that. But it required creating that space for people to talk about what's possible and really enabling the frontline teams to say what they needed,
Mm-hmm.
and helping their management to deliver on that.
Yeah. Great. I see one other earlier question from Shireen. What are some great ways of introducing new processes to employees in an already uncertain working environment? It's a really great question, and there's definitely some friction around, when everything is changed and then you're bringing in more change, it can definitely be overwhelming. So I would say that the first process is don't introduce it all at once. And, now that we're a couple months in, it's probably the time to start, bringing those kinds of things back to your employees and introducing those new processes. So, I definitely wouldn't try to change everything at once. And, I would find different modes. We've had a lot of success, working with our clients to find different modes to share those new processes. So whether it's, we might do a webinar through the organization or sort of, a town hall presentation. We would have small discussion moments depending on the scale of the change in the process. Really developing strong visuals and communication tools so that you can reach people in lots of different ways. Just like you meet your customers where you're at, you want to be meeting your employees where they're at as well. And so, these types of things help to do that and to keep your finger on the pulse, always doing those pulse checks to figure out when are people generally ready for more change.
Yeah, I want to go to David's question about how the rapid change due to COVID-19 helped show people that radical change could happen. And I think this is really aligned with, when we're talking about pivoting and, a pivot that is kind of initiated by the organization versus the pivot that is forced on the organization. I think definitely COVID-19 forced big change globally, and it's like one of those like really interesting opportunities really to do things at a really big scale that probably wouldn't have been possible without that. So if we want to put on a very optimistic lens and look at what the pandemic enabled, not just what it caused, I think a lot of the maybes that we were kind of contemplating before are now a reality. Like I am very passionate about the future of work, and we've spent years talking and speculating about what the future of work could look like. And we also talking about, what technology and could enable. And now we are in a place where digital transformation is happening, we want it or not. Even in places where we felt that it might be a bit slower, like government and certain type of institutions, like also education, now they are in a place where they had to really opt in, no matter how reluctant they are or how they might have done it without these circumstances. So yes, change is real, and I think it creates a burning platform for us to continue to think about innovation work and make innovation work less conceptual for organizations and more practical and really attached to immediate actions and immediate business results. So innovation now doesn't happen in a lab anymore. And we always talked about how important it is to integrate those practices across the business. Now we know that if you're not set up to do this and you don't have the capabilities, your response to that change will be slow, and you might not even get the chance to change because your business or your organization is not relevant, or it might just not have the resources to enable that change. So yes, just to confirm and saying our perspective on this is very aligned, and this discomfort that the pandemic caused is also a springboard towards what we assumed to be next, and now we know that it will be the next thing that we have to design for and live with.
Mm-hmm. Answering Nina, what tools do you use to collect online behavior data? I guess we sort of had systems in place to be collecting data and signals for a long time at the moment, and now there's just a lot more coming in. So as a team, we collect signals and whatnot through Slack, and then we organize them using various spreadsheets and databases, and then we do the work to synthesize them on a regular basis to be able to look back almost on a monthly basis and say, what are the signals and what are the things that are coming up? So that's the way that we do it. And I would say that it's a matter of scaling some of that and really, we have a team, or we have some roles and accountabilities that, are always looking out for what are the trends and what is the behavior that's out there, and making sure those signals are coming in as well. Simon, I'm not sure if you have something else to add to that.
Yeah, and just to say that obviously there are a lot of tools out there and platforms that could be leveraged, but our intention behind this is to make this as low of an investment as possible to just get that practice going. And we obviously use ourselves as an experiment, and we feel like if we're able to do it, then we are able to demonstrate and show people how to do it with the lowest investments, and in terms of technology and stuff, just making it accessible and possible for all sorts of organizations is something that we really care about. And this is why we've opted for these very simple and straightforward things that might not just be used for those purposes, but could easily integrate in other practices and other tools that different organizations already have in place.
Yeah. And Lisa, this might be the last question. The last one is a comment. So what techniques do you use to influence your clients to think beyond the immediate crisis and day-to-day challenges, to think ahead, plan and strategize for the future, even the near future? This is a really great question, and it's something that we've been facing a lot in the last couple of months. When people are in that survive mode, they're really looking at that. So there is a fine balance of nurturing that and supporting where they're at. And then, we use a lot of frameworks like the disruption canvas. We'll facilitate conversations, that are, I guess, catered to where they're at in order to, through dialogue and get people to see, what's needed beyond the immediate. It really depends on the clients. Some clients in, consumer packaged goods, they're, trying to keep up with demand right now. And so, we're really looking at that short term is actually also setting them up for the long term. So we're able to, do that as well. And using frameworks like the disruption canvas to help have those conversations. We've seen a lot of success with that happening as well. So, I don't know if I can probably talk for hours on the specific techniques, but those are the types of things that we're doing. So we're using a lot of our innovation practice in order to actually get there and think ahead. And again, sometimes it starts with getting the organization into the mindset first, so that there might take some time. And as much as we want to jump in and help them plan and strategize, if we're not setting them up with the mindsets that they need to get there, it's going to be too much of a leap, and they're not going to be able to stay along for the conversation to get there. So it really depends, and we like to use framework and have really structured systemic conversations around these types of topics. And the last comment is just from, not just, but it's from Farzad. Thank you. We wish all of you guys a great day ahead, and it was really wonderful to talk to you guys about this, and we can keep the conversation going. Feel free to reach out to Simon or myself, or really anyone at the moment to have these conversations.
Yeah, I'm just saying thank you, and we'll be around. So to Heather's point, feel free to reach out. And thanks for your time, and hopefully the content met your expectations.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Enjoy your
Thank you.
afternoon. Bye.